Without further ado, Dr. Thompson from our own department talking on the meaning of nonsense, syllables, vocables, and song, yodeling, yoiking, diddling, lilting, eefing, hoodling, and hocketing with pizza.
Thank you. Yeah, I was a little sloppy in the email I sent to the Anthropology Club, so there was a little bit of misunderstanding or confusion, at least, about my title. But I'll be talking about vocables, which are defined as meaningless syllables, often used in songs, things like tra-la-la or hey nani nani, but in other things as well, as for example, eeny meeny miny mo. My goal is to actually not talk about the meaning, as my title suggests, because they don't have any meaning. That's what defines them as vocables. But rather, I want to come up with general principles that can account for vocable use in as many traditions as I can. Principles that would explain, but not predict, too many variables, explain why vocables are used in specific traditions. Now, before I get started, it's customary to quote those that came before you to show that your ideas are not original, and so a tribute to those that came before me. We have Old MacDonald and The Farmer in the Dell, and so Fred Flintstone. So these are all examples of vocables. The chimp is kind of a rough transcription, but you notice about these that you have a kind of an alternation between accented and unaccented syllables, or in the case of the music, a beat and off the beat. And then, at least in these ones, end in kind of a longer note, including the mo, and eeny, meeny, miny, mo. And then this is what the chimp sounds like, so you don't have to rely on my transcription, very rough as it is. Okay, now that was just a little bit of what he said. Now, chimpanzees, this is what's called a pant hoot. Chimpanzees, when they vocalize both when they're inhaling and when they're, exhaling and when they're inhaling. A part of my paper, this is from a paper that I'm working on right now. Part of my paper has to do with the origin of music and language. And I'm saying that they have the same origin, in evolutionary terms, and they're based on actually the ape style of vocalization, pant hoot, and that's the reason you have these asymmetrical pulsing, like a weak pulse and a strong pulse and then a weak pulse and so on. Okay, just a little bit. Vocables are all over the place. You find them on all the continents except, of course, Antarctica. There are people who have written on vocables have attempted to come up with some kind of universal functions, which always end up sounding much too vague. But I think the best definition I can come up with is just you use them when you want to sing, or I guess vocalize in general, but I'll be talking mostly about music from now on. But when you want to sing, but you don't want to or you don't need to use lyrics. So you find vocables a lot in various kinds of dance music, powwow music, Scottish diddling, I'll talk about later on. You find them in work songs, both these cases where you have coordination of activity among groups of people. You find them in types of vocal display where the vocalization is the important thing, not the lyrics themselves, and just a variety of other reasons. Like if you forget the words, you'll use vocables sometimes to make meditative sounds. Cultural aesthetics, that's also very general, but to give you an example, that wasn't the example, but to give you an example, the ethnomusicologist Bruno Nettle was doing research with the Blackfoot, And they sang some songs for him with vocables, and then he sang one of his songs, and they really didn't like his song because it had words to it. And they said, if you wanted to tell us something, why don't you just tell it to us? Why go through the trouble of singing it? So to them, the music is the important thing. Whatever message you have, if you have one, you would actually say. And various other things I won't get into, cadence marking, fillers. If you have a beat, but no more lyrics, so you just say, hey, or something like that. Now, just in terms of general comments about the vocable structure, the most common vocable in the world is a consonant vowel, something like la or d. They tend, the vocables used, the sounds used, tend to conform to the sound systems of the language to which they belong, but not entirely. So you'll have actually, in a few cases, sounds that occur in vocables that do not appear in the spoken language. Like in Navajo, in vocables, they very commonly will use nga, the ng sound, but not in the language. Also, the proportion is much different. So very typically, you'll have a lot more R's and L's in vocables. They may occur in the spoken language, but not to as great of an extent. And then, so the most common, commonly used consonants would be what we call sonorants. These would be nasal sounds like N and M. Liquids would be L's and R sounds. Glides, W and Y. And laryngeals made in the larynx, the voice box, the glottis, that area. There you have the H, very common, and the glottal stop. And the most common vowels are just the most common vowels in the world in general, just the 5 vowels. This is phonetic transcription, but in order you have O, A, A. These are the most common, and then to a lesser extent, but still very common, depending on tradition, E and U. Some general comments about music and language, their similarities. And because of these similarities, I think vocables, this consonant vowel structure, is perfect for the singing of notes. I suspect that it came before actual musical instruments, but we don't have any recordings that old. But both music and language combine 2 types of vocalization that you see in animals. Some animals will have a contoured sound. It's sort of a long wail, something along that line. It might be monotone and dropping off at the end. It's a very common type of thing. And some animals do a pulsing sound. Like, for example, when a squirrel is scolding you, it does that pulsing sound. Chimpanzees do a pulsing with a pant hoot. So it's asymmetrical, a strong, weak, that kind of thing. Human vocalization is not like the chimpanzee. When we vocalize, we are exhaling almost all the time. And so I suspect that because we exhale, we can control the sound enough so that we can have a contour in terms of the intonation, the pitch. But then we can also have the pulsing. You might say we have the best of both worlds in terms of animal communication because of the way we do it. But it's not just pulsing. It's what I'm calling asymmetrical. It's strong, weak, sometimes more than one weak, but it's alternation of strong and weak pulses, which I believe has its source in what I call the biphasic, well, not just me, but people call biphasic vocalization, when you inhale and when you exhale. So both music and language combine asymmetrical pulsing. These would be beats for music and feet for language into intonational phrases. These phrases are the basis of syntax in language. That whenever you say, for example, a noun phrase or subject, there's an intonational contour to it, and then the overall sentence, there's a gradual lowering of the pitch. I'm not going to get into much the third point here, but in both cases, phrasing is hierarchical or recursive in both language and music. And just to give you an example, which actually I put together this morning, because I thought maybe I couldn't explain it enough without a picture. But if you look at the farmer in the dell, you have smaller phrases, both musically and linguistically as well. I put an X above the beats, and you can see the lines represent the measure, which is a common way of musicians have of organizing the notes. So the measure would be, well, metrical, just like the metrics you find in language, but it's not necessarily the same thing as phrasing. So I'll be using phrasing from now on in a very general way. It could refer to the beat note and whatever notes occur before the next beat. I could be referring to an intonational phrase because I think in vocalization they're both marked in more or less the same way. But you notice that, for example, the is not part of the first measure, but it's a part of the first phrase. Now, these are some of the principles I'll be talking about and writing about. Some of them are related to the notes. This would be the pulsing part of it, the individual notes. Some of them are related to phrasing. This would be the intonational part. And I won't go through these since I talk about them in more detail. So the first one would be the consonant vowel principle. So vowels are used to mark prosodic elements of a note, and hence related to the melody. Prosody refers to pitch, duration, and intensity. Consonants, on the other hand, mark the onset of a note. They separate, consonants separate one note from the other. Vowels, another way of saying this is vowels convey melody, consonants convey notes, or vowels convey the intonational contour, consonants convey the pulsing. Both are involved in rhythm. In order to explain the next principle, I want to say just a little bit about sonority. Vowels are the most highest on the sonority scale. Everyone, a linguist, agrees that sonorants exist, although they can't agree on what they actually are. But whatever the definition, well, my favorite is that sonorant sounds have periodic sound waves, that you have a repetition. It could be a very complex sound wave, but it repeats, whereas an aperiodic sound wave would be where you have a sound wave that does not repeat. It's not patterned. That would be low sonority. But basically, vowels are the most sonorous liquids, the L's and R sounds, the M's, N's, and then fricatives, where there's a continuation of the air coming out, creating you have the friction sound, and then stops are a type of consonant where you just block the air completely. Just in general, if you have consonants in a syllable, and you can have a syllable that's just a vowel, you need what's called the nucleus, which is usually a vowel. The syllable is least sonorant on the fringes. So you have in bland, it begins and ends with a stop consonant. In the middle, you have, toward the middle, you have the L on one side of the vowel and the N on the other, and then the vowel in the middle. Now, in terms of my principles, the note onset principle is related to the consonant vowel principle, where to emphasize note separation, you use an onset consonant in your vocable with low sonority. For example, B and D, very common. You find this in diddling, that I'll talk about later, and then scat singing. It's a way of singing jazz. There's a lot of B's and D's. So this is just a short clip of Louis Armstrong and singing a little bit of Hotter Than That, where you can hear a lot of B's.
Bop,
Okay, sorry to cut you off, Louis, but you notice he did have one L in there. It was a drawn-out note and kind of low and kind of sonorous, melodic. It's a very, someone can sing like this. It conveys really incredible musical subtlety. Now, to emphasize melody, you find in other types of singing, you use an onset with low sonority. So this would be la 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 type singing. The example I have here of is yoiking. Yoiking is done by the Sami people, also called the Lapps. You find in Norway. It's some people consider an odd style of singing. There's no taking breaths at phrases. You just sing until you run out of breath, and then you start again, even if it's in the middle of a phrase. The yoik is mostly vocables, and it's used to, it's about some subject, usually a person, but not necessarily, could be an animal or an abstraction. And everything I've read about that say it's not really about them, it more encapsulates them as sort of representing the subject. So this is an example of a Sami. I have one from a field recording later on, but this guy I just got off of YouTube. I think it's just someone, tourist, that took a picture of some guy in his, his Sami outfit yoiking. But this is what it sounds like. So you can hear the pulsing, but not as distinct as you do in the scat singing. It's more melodious. Okay, this is just for demonstrating purposes of demonstration. I recorded myself going ba 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 and then la la la, which is not good experiment. You don't experiment on yourself, but just a demonstration. You can see that this would be decibels. The peak of a syllable is the loudest, and you can see that the distinction between, going from low decibel to high decibel is much more distinct and noticeable. Whereas in the going la la la, you can still see 3 pulses there, but not as distinct. I'm going to talk a little bit about Scottish vocable use. There's actually more than 3, but the 3 mentioned, you have what's called diddling, or some people call it lilting. Other people use lilting to something's a little more sonorous than diddling. But this is mostly for singing dance tunes. It's associated more with fiddle music. Sometimes if people want to have a dance, no one has an instrument, they'll diddle. Diddle is a very common pair of vocables that are paired together in diddling, hence the name. So in diddling, you have the least sonorous syllable onsets. Cantarecht is used for singing bagpipe tunes, especially the classical bagpipe pibroch. It's an intermediate sonority. And then you have refrains in Gaelic songs, which be the most sonorous. And I have an example of well, first the cantarecht and then the dilting, the same man singing the same tune.
Well, if I was doing a real one with a piping sound, I would get maybe Now, if I was diddling to someone in a fiddle, I would probably diddle.
And then the refrains and songs, this is a very common type of work song that used to be done as what's called a walking song. People don't walk anymore as a work activity, but the songs are very much alive, including the Gallic songs. So here's what walking is. You have sheep, you take the wool off, you spin the wool into the yarn, you weave it into a tweed, and then you have to shrink the tweed in order for it to be workable as clothing. The way they shrink it is they get it wet, they put it on a table, and some places they, well, they'll use a water wheel, but they don't have this in the Hebrides. They'll kick it, or in this case, they'll pound it with their hands. And when they do that, they pound the tweed, they pass it around, and they sing. And so this is women walking on Eriskay. The picture's from 1934. The recording is a little later than that. Okay, well that's enough. I'm a little behind time. So, and then the walking songs are very much alive, and this is something again I got off of YouTube. It's a clip from the Highland Sessions, was produced by BBC Wales. This is Kathleen McInnes singing "Gullish Gully." So she is my sweetheart, and I just added subtitles, including the vocables. And I cut off the clip after very short. The next principle would be the note emphasis principle, where a vocable, sorry about the and there, I changed the wording, a vocable on a beat note or a note long in duration will have a stronger nucleus than other notes. And I'm defining strength, some people call syllable weight, but never mind what a mora is. But basically, you have two vowels, that's stronger, like in diphthong, I, or a vowel plus a sonorant as in un. That's a stronger nucleus than just a plain vowel. And then you have weaker vowels. For example, the schwa is a sound. And then a syllabic consonant would be something like ul or and you don't have a vowel at all. That would be a weak. An example of this, this is some diddling actually done in Appalachia by someone called Emma Shelton. And you notice the longer notes she's going using a two mora, or using here, dum dum, or the diphthong day. The beat would fall on ya and dum, but if you do a quicker beat, it would be yaddle, diddle. So the weakest syllables use D with a syllabic L there. And so this is what that's particular song sounds like.
Pretty little girl with a blue dress on, pretty little girl with a blue dress on, pretty little girl with a blue dress on, stole my mule and away she's gone. Dadda did a dum dum did a da da day, dadda did a dum dum did a da da day, dadda did a dum dum did a da da day, dadda did a dum dum did a da da day.
Oh, sorry, diddle day. The next note principle is the pitch principle. So higher pitched notes are marked with vowels which have a higher second formant, especially the vowel E, and then lower pitch sounds are marked with vowels with a lower second formant, especially O, and you don't know what a formant is, probably most of you. But whenever you vibrate a string, or in a human case, the vocal cords, it vibrates at a certain frequency. So say my vocal cords are vibrating now at hundreds times per second. And then the sound waves would be kind of up and down, and I never mind about the details, but 100 cycles per second, which we call cycle per second, we call hertz. The way we form a tongue in our mouth, amplifies these harmonics. I didn't tell you what the harmonics are, and not just 100 times per second, but I'm talking now in many pitches, multiples of what the fundamental pitch is. So if I'm doing 100, it's 200, 300, and 400, and so on. And eventually gets weaker. But the way we form the tongue amplifies the harmonics at certain frequencies. And the vowel E, the tongue is far forward. There's a small pocket of air in front of the tongue. And that's what forms the second formant. Now, if you whisper the vowel E and then whisper the vowel O, you can hear a difference in pitch even though you're not vocalizing. So this would be the second formant for the vowel E and the second formant for the vowel O. Again, this is a short clip of Louis Armstrong's Hotter Than That. He does some of this, although that's not a major component of scat singing. But you notice sometimes he goes bow bow and sometimes beat bow. And when he goes beat bow, the beat is at a higher note than the bow. Okay. The cantor oct is very much based on the pitch principle. I won't go through this, but and especially not the nasals. There's a reason the nasals represent the lower pitches, but the O, A, E, as you go up the scale, your second formant also goes up. In pipe music, you don't have you cannot convey pulsing like you can with a flute or many other instruments by how you blow. It's a continuous stream of sound, the same pitch, not the same pitch, but the same intensity. And so in order to get the pulsing, pipers use a lot of very quick grace notes. And in the cantor oct, the vocables for representing this music, they use consonants to represent these very quick grace notes. And so here's an example. In the late 18th, early 19th century, a guy called Colin Moore Campbell wrote down cantor oct. It was almost certainly done before that, but he was trying to develop a way of writing down the classical bagpipe music. People weren't using musical scores, and pibroch doesn't really lend itself well to musical scores because it has no regular beat. It's really entirely based on phrasing. So he wrote this down. It's been, Colin Campbell's cantor oct has been accepted by the Pibroch Society as the official cantor oct. But I won't go through all this, but you can see that many other people sort of have their own version of it. But I'll first play Donald McLeod as a famous piper doing the first few phrases of Kronen na Kelch sa Wein Vic as a classical pibroch. And then right after that, you'll hear Andrew Wright singing the cantor oct. And you can see how well the cantor oct actually matches the pipe music itself.
Handorodan hodandro hyodrorodan hyodantro handli vede hosherede.
This is oh, sorry, I forgot. Sorry to interrupt you. This is Rona Lightfoot, who uses the cantor oct not just for pibroch. She's a really good bagpipe player, both the pibroch and what pipers call light music. It would be dance music in this case. So she's first talking about cantor oct and then doing a reel in cantor oct style.
It's not really very many people who sing it out. I know that some pipers do still use Canterach, but I think you're the only person I've ever heard singing it out in company or on a stage.
Yes, well, I was cheeky enough to start it, so it kind of, I got the label, but loads of people can do it. Other people can do it. But I must say that the people who speak Gaelic do it better than the others, I would say.
You also have phrase-related principles. And again, going through these fairly quickly, the onset of a phrase is marked with a voiceless consonant, especially H or glottal stop, or with a vowel. A phrase cohesion principle, notes within the same phrase has a similar sequence of vowels and or consonants as other phrases. Internal sonority principle, notes within the same phrase will be separated by a sonorant. And the parallel phrase principle, phrases that are similar musically will use similar vocal patterns, either parallelism or repetition. Okay, this is a yoik. And you can see the phrasing here. You have like halala lango and something very similar. This hololo langa. I put a dotted line where you have a pickup note to the next phrase. It doesn't really belong musically to the rest of the measure here. And so I hope this one works. Okay, you also find, and this is the refrains in a Gaelic song. This is Julie Fowlis singing Hakelis Edir Mis Ian, and she has the vocables. These are, of course, each line would be a phrase. Each line is divided into two subphrases, and then you have the beats here, Heri, Yua, Heri, Aho. I'll play just a couple verses of that. Sorry, I meant to point out the words. Okay, I think I'll skip the next, well, just very quickly I'll play this without commenting. This is 6/8 times, so the phrases are divided into three parts, holavak, hilavak, and you can see the vowel is changed with these.
och mischer urlar fappel, gruppe gannen dusel kattel, genjar och gehechne seitche, tremech mavran harlem baikne, hollevak, holilo, hollevak, horohi, hollevak, holilo, smjar och la clown dolmi.
A quick Wind River Shoshone hand game song. You notice that you have a repetition of vocables. It begins, this particular verse begins and ends with the yo, which from what I understand is common in this tradition. And then a lot of the phrases, not all of them, begin with an H. You have the longer notes represented by the I, the diphthong here, the shorter notes by a plain vowel. This musical score, the music, and this picture came from Judith Vander's Song Prince. The phrasing I put in myself, so my apologies to Judith Vander. But and then Fanny Schwartz is a former Amish woman who recorded some Amish yodels. She's from Adams County to the south, and now I think lives in Iowa. She recorded these and did harmony over her own singing. But I have the first two measures, or the first four measures actually, but the first measure is hodalei. Very similar. You have the low notes, the introductory notes, and then the triangles represent the falsetto voice that you get in yodeling. There's a break from the normal voice to falsetto. You have A-E, A-E, A-E. And then the next line is similar musically, but instead of the A-E, it's up a step, but also it's going O-U, O-U, O-U. And then the last line kind of summarizes the first two, hodalei, and then hololo'u. And then D would be the last note. So this is just a short clip of her song. This is another of her yodels. Each beat has the same vocable pattern, holalati. And then the falsetto voice is at the end of each phrase. And there's more. This next one I found, at the website listed below. This is a Swiss man yodeling. He sings a yodel song that actually Fanny Schwartz sings, and then he has a different yodel. He does the yodel she just did, the starke yodel I just played. He does it a little faster. I slowed it down, and he uses the same vocables pattern, A to E and O to U, as she does. And I hope this works.
Und jetzt wandert es und jetzt wandert es und so stieg sie.
I hope you all feel pepped up now. The next one is actually, it doesn't directly illustrate my points, but it's kind of interesting if I'd stick it in. Erica Stuckey, I think was born in California to Swiss parents, or at least one Swiss parent, and then when she was young they moved to Switzerland, so she's fluent in both English and Swiss German. but she's kind of a avant-garde yodeler. And at the end, before the clip kicks in here, she's singing some kind of depressing song. As lyrics are, I'm drowning in a river, dreaming of the sea. I don't really understand it, but it's kind of depressing. And then when it picks up here, she's lying down, and then she does some seaside sound effects, including a really great seagull impression. And then next thing you know, she's like yodeling, looking really happy. So here you go.
See, here I lie. I see no sky, my beautiful pearl shells and I lie very still. I lie very still.
This is from, very uncool yodeling, but I don't know, it's uncool, but it's from the late 1930s. The Zurich sisters, what's interesting about them is what they do to the claim of what yodeling is. So people usually say yodeling is breaking from a normal voice to falsetto voice. But at least one of them is breaking from a falsetto voice to falsetto voice. So it's not, people actually don't agree on what yodeling is. Okay, so here's the Zurich sisters. They're also called nicknamed the Cackle Sisters, and you'll see why.
I come to town the other night, I hear the noise and I see the fight. He watched me, he was running around, says old Dan Tucker's coming to town. So get out of the way, old Dan Tucker, get out of the way, old Dan Tucker, get out of the way, old Dan Tucker, you're too late to get your supper. I did a little day.
I hope you enjoyed that. I really did. Okay, and actually, yodeling is not just in Europe, in the Alpine region. People have found it all over the world. And so I have a couple of yodeling from Cameroon. The first, Benzele people. This is from a field recording made by, I think would be Sima Arom. I'm not sure how to say his name.
That time you been love me, eh? So me too, I believe you. Now so I go, I marry you. But just now I be sorry, sorry plenty. Sorry that I marry you. Because you make me cry all time. Why you make me cry and feel sad like that? Tell me. Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Okay, and then lastly, there's, I think, about 5 minutes more stuff to do. But I wanted to get back to the biphasic vocalization and the pulsing. I put this at the end because I didn't think I'd necessarily have time for it. But you find this biphasic vocalization all over. The first example is what's called ephing, and it's recorded by Jimmy Riddle, who's explaining how to do it. Jimmy Riddle sang for a while, appeared on the television show Hee Haw. So he'd do this ephing, and someone else would be standing next to him doing ham boning, kind of slapping his body. The next one is going to Babenzele people. The Hindehu, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, is like a whistle, and they will blow into it and then vocalize. It's like hocketing. By the way, hocketing is a type of call and response, but the antiphony or call and response is for a longer phrase. We sing a phrase and then some other person or group responds, but hocketing is like kind of individual notes or very short phrases. So he's really hocketing with the whistle. And then Sid Hempel is a southern United States African-American man who has a band that I'd actually talked about last year when I was talking about the banjo. Lucius Smith was in his band. It's one of my favorite banjo players. But he's demonstrating something you find among southern African Americans for calling to a picnic. It's like a fife, or they'll use a panpipes and drum. And again, it's very much like you'll see, you blow into the fife and then you inhale. And then I'll show you the Chukchi and the Inuit if we have time. So here's Jimmy Riddle.
With the letter E, you say E, I say E, and then you go, and then you kind of gasp. You put the three together, E, like that. And then you do I. See it? E, I'll do it real slow. E, I, E, 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 I, O,
Okay, well, he that goes on to, here's the Ben Bazin. Okay, and then Sid Hemphill. Okay. The next two examples, we're almost out of time, so I'll maybe just show a little bit of one. But the Chukchi and Inuit people, both, and the Ainu in Japan, have a tradition where women will, sometimes two, sometimes a larger group, will hocket with each other in biphasic vocalization. The Chukchi, I don't have a good version of this. All I found was something on YouTube. And so I don't know how authentic it is. But it's still interesting, even if it's not authentic. She's still doing the biphasic thing. So I'm not concerned about documenting Chukchi culture just for this presentation. But you can see the biphasic vocalization here. Okay, I'm sorry to cut it off, but one more slide. I want to leave time for a question or two. This is the katayat, they call throat singing sometimes, Inuit people. It's very much a live tradition. People are continuing as best they can. And so here, a couple of sisters explaining it.
Actually, when you first start out throat singing, learning how to breathe properly is very important. And one of the sounds that best demonstrates this is so I'm breathing out on the and then breathing in on the so you can see if you don't take enough air in or if you don't let out enough air, you start to get a little lightheaded. We'll just see how far we can go on this one.
Well, I took a little longer than I wanted to, but I'm done. So. I have time for a few questions if anyone has any, or comments. Nothing. Yeah, you
I have a question. What was the word or phrase you used to describe the chimpanzee called?
Well, I call it biphasic, or pant hoot.
It was just pant hoot?
The pant hoot, yeah. Right, pant, yeah, P-A-N-T, hoot, H-O-O-T. Someone, yeah.
How is it that regional accents get lost when a song is sung? Like someone singing, you know, a British person singing a song sounds just like an American person, but yet when they speak, they have a distinctive accent. It's like you can place exactly where it is that they're from when they're singing.
Well, talking off the top of my head, I think there's more than one reason for it. In the case of British singers, they're many times they'll singing rock or blues or American music, and when they sing it, they'll take on the accent of the Americans. The other is that accent is not just the pronunciation of specific sounds, but would include things related to prosody, which is zeroed out when you're singing. But if you listen carefully, there is a difference in dialect in terms of pronunciation of songs with specific singers. You know, same thing when people will sing, like say you decide you want to do the pretty little girl with a red dress on, and you listen to that, you say, I like that, and then you start singing. So you might take on her accent, even though you wouldn't normally speak that way yourself. That's the best I can do off the top of my head. I haven't thought about that much. Yeah?
I was sent from the library with this question by a librarian who come today. She said she wanted you to comment, and I'm glad you mentioned Louis Armstrong's scat singing. She said he and Ella Fitzgerald were famous for this duets, but the apocryphal story or not, that this was invented when he dropped all of his notes, his paper, his sheet music on the floor and had to improvise.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true or not, but from what I've read, there are examples, even recorded examples, of people doing it before he did not invent scat singing. And there certainly were people using vocables for all kinds of music before that. So I doubt, don't know for sure, but I really doubt that that's true. Yeah?
I actually took jazz history with Dr. Vernon this summer, and that is one story as to why scat singing became popular, but it's not really for sure. It's not known because there's no recorded history of it. That's the story behind it.
Lots of other evidence, so I think it dispels that probably.
Yeah, it just became popular because of Louis Armstrong and his name. That's all.
And they're not necessarily contradictory. Like he might have actually dropped his music and started scat singing, but he probably didn't invent it. Any other questions or comments? Yeah.
I'm going to refer to a presentation you did in prior years where there were two women who were singing back and forth that were...
Right, that's the Inuit Katayat. The way you'll see it now is like you just saw it, where they're facing each other. There's some evidence, or some people claim that in some places at least they'll use their mouths as resonating chambers. So it looks like they kind of cup their mouths. It looks like they're kissing or almost kissing or something. The Inuit people today say that they don't do that, but it just could because it might appear to, that you see Europeans sort of reacted to that. Hey, that's just a little too much. So I don't really know. Is that what you're asking about?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, would that be biphasic?
Yeah, oh, it is. Yeah, it's the same thing. The same thing exactly. It is biphasic, and it's just the same thing that the last slide was. Just not so close. Yeah.
Okay, so when they're going back and forth like that, is it just for the sound, or is there like a competitiveness between the two?
Yeah, the Inuit, it is a competition. Whoever lasts or messes up first loses. But it's kind of a friendly competition. There's no throat singing Olympics or anything. You don't get a trophy. It's just sort of a fun thing.